Hello, and welcome to another edition of Utterly Pointless Comparisons here on Engelbard. Today we'll be taking a look at the classic run-and-gun shoot-'em-up Contra from Konami. The arcade version was released in 1987, while the NES version followed in 1988. The arcade hardware is a custom Konami board that is powered by a Hitachi 6309 CPU. 6309 is basically a souped-up version of Motorola's 6809, which is an 8-bit CPU that's significantly more advanced than the 6502 found within the NES. The arcade version uses the YM2151 sound chip that is found in so many other arcade boards of the era, while the NES version, of course, uses the NES's custom sound chip that mainly runs two different waveforms on a few different channels of a few other things like a PCM channel that could be used. Now, the arcade one allows for 2 layers of full-screen parallax, while the NES version is only a flat layer that don't even try faking parallax. So as far as the look between the two games goes, they look pretty different, to be honest. The arcade one, first of all, has a vertical layout, or what you would call portrait mode these days, while the NES version uses a standard 4x3 landscape mode. So the video that you're about to see, I matched the size of the screens vertically, just so they would fit on the screen better and be easier to look at in the video, but they are not proportional with this view. I'm not going to talk a lot about the differences between graphics and sound in this case, because the arcade hardware is significantly more advanced than the home system, so it's really kind of an unfair comparison in this one. But what I will do, primarily here, is talk about the gameplay. Quite a few things have changed, and frankly, the arcade one is a little rough around the edges and feels sort of incomplete, whereas the NES version is much more refined and is just generally more well put together, I would say. So what are some of the things I'm talking about here? Glad you asked. The first thing I will point out is that in the arcade game, when you're changing your angles and shooting, it doesn't happen immediately. So if you look at the NES version, when you shoot straight across, it goes like this. If you change your angle and then shoot again immediately, it goes like this. In the arcade version, it features 16 firing directions, so what they do is when you shoot, let's say straight for example, it goes like this. When you change to the 45-degree angle and you press the button a few more times, the next shot doesn't go here right away. You'll have a few interim steps before it gets there. So changing directions and angles can be very slow, which can lead to a lot of untimely and frankly unfair deaths. Another big difference is the number of levels. The arcade one has 5 levels, whereas the NES version has 8. Does this mean the NES version has 3 exclusive levels? No. But how is this magic possible? So in the arcade version of Contra, level 5 consists of 4 distinct, unique areas, and these levels correspond with levels 5, 6, 7, and 8 in the NES version. In the arcade one, you just play continuously through. It doesn't stop. You just keep going. Whereas in the NES version, each time you finish the area, you complete the level like normal. One other big difference is that when you finish a level in the NES version, you get that familiar end-level jingle at the end of every stage. In the arcade version, it only plays that jingle one time when you finish stage 2. It doesn't play it at any other point in the entire game. And now a note on recording methodology for this. Pretty simple this time around. I just played both games straight through. I didn't stop, I didn't use save states, I never reloaded. For the arcade one, I died a few times towards the end. For the NES version, I completed it on 1 life. It's just something I can do after having played this game regularly for over 30 years at this point. Holy cow, that's a long time. This game is old, I'm old. Ugh. But Contra is still my favorite action game on the NES, and that's why I still play it regularly. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the arcade and NES versions of Contra in a complete playthrough. Enjoy. Welcome back. I hope you liked watching that complete playthrough of both the NES and arcade versions of Contra. So now a few other fun little tidbits for those of you who stuck around. So we have levels 2 and 4, which are the third-person levels. And in the arcade version of the game, once you destroy the sensor and you run forward, you hit a wall and you have to go either left or right. If you go the wrong way, there's a wall, which can be a problem because these levels are strictly timed in the arcade game. In the NES version, there's no timer, and there's no maze, you just go straight through. You never have to change directions. Another interesting note for the home version of this game on the NES, so if you take a look at the Famicom release in Japan, it has a lot of things that are absent from the NES version. So it has a few story cutscenes, it has a map between each level, sort of like Ghosts and Goblins or Ghouls and Ghosts, and it also has some animated tiles in the background, so you get some effects like watching trees sway in the wind. So do all these extras make for a better version of Contra? Absolutely not. These things slow the game down, except for the animated backgrounds, which are just distracting and don't look well done at all. So this is one case where the US version of the game is definitely better than the Japanese release. Because Contra is better when it's not interrupted. And lastly, I'll just make a historical note that this was one of the first games, not the very first one, but one of the earliest games to include the infamous Konami code. And that will do it for this edition of Utterly Pointless Comparisons. If you would like to contribute to these videos and keep them up and running, you can donate to me on Patreon at patreon.com/Engelbard, and there'll be a link below. If you want to subscribe, that'd be neat. If you want to ring the bell and get notified about new videos, cool. Other than that, feel free to leave your comments below along with any suggestions you might have for the videos. And I will say thank you for watching and see me later.